It's time to continue our series, Power Ranking, the position groups of the National Hockey League. This week, Hunter and I are going to tackle the winger positions on this week's edition of Locked On NHL.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, host of Locked On Oilers. That is Hunter Hodies, one of the hosts of Locked On Penguins. We want to thank everybody who makes Locked On NHL a part of their day, the first listen. Locked On NHL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. So continuing through our series, we've done defensemen, we've done goalies. This week we're doing wingers. Next week we will wrap up with centers and then start moving into the various divisions. So Hunter, we are in, I don't want to call it the golden age of the NHL because every generation thinks their era is the best era, but it feels like with each passing year, the various position groups get a little more talented. The average player gets a little bit better. And it was hard to put together this list. You know, there were a good 15, 20 guys you could all realistically make an argument for to get into your top 10, depending on what you prioritize. And as we've said at various points during these position group power rankings, these are our opinions. They are entirely subjective. Hunter and I have different lists, and they are based on what we value. Some people might value a two-way player a little bit more than somebody dynamic offensively. Somebody might value somebody with some more accomplishments like championships versus just counting stats. So let's get on into it. I will throw the floor over to you. Who is your number 10 on your list?
Number 10 for me, kicking things off, Sam Reinhart of the Florida Panthers. Yes, I know, 57 goals, 94 points this past season. He was especially lethal on the power play, especially from that slot area. It feels like every time he got the puck in that area, the puck was just going in the back of the net. His release from that spot was deadly. And the reason I have him at number 10 and not a bit higher up on the list, I just want to see him do this again and maybe again before I maybe move him up to, number 8, number 7, something like that. Again, he's had some very good seasons in the NHL. He hasn't had a season like this, Nick, where he almost scored 60 freaking goals and almost had 100 points. So I want to see him do this again before I move him up. He got that big contract this offseason. So for me, Sam Reinhart, number 10, but I do think if he has a very similar year next season, he's going to probably get up closer to the top 5. But I have Reinhart kicking things off, at number 10.
Number 10 for me, I have Brad Marchand, one of the best wingers of his era, somebody who even at 35 is still an above average, borderline elite player. His counting stat production is tremendous. He has consistently been amongst the leaders in points in the entire NHL over the last handful of seasons. Over the last 5 years, he's 14th in points, and then he's top 25 in goals over the last 5 years. Consistently one of the best two-way forwards in the entire league. Assumed the captaincy when Bergeron retired, and has really kind of continued that mantle of going from Chara to Bergeron to him, where they still have that lineage back to the Bruins team that won the Stanley Cup going on 13, 14 years ago now. And the snarl, the nastiness, that has value. And when it's on a player like Marchand and some of the other players on our list, when you have functional nastiness, you can be miserable to play against, and you're an elite hockey player. That's the complete package. I was going back and forth between Marchand and who my number 9 is, back and forth because they're so close. There are a handful of other guys I was considering. I'll shout out, I was considering Jesper Bratt, William Nylander. There were a couple other guys I was considering in that last spot, but I have Marchand at number 10.
Right. I was also considering those two as well. I know he's not what he used to be, Nick, but of course I had to consider Alex Ovechkin, considering he's the greatest goal scorer this league has ever seen, at least in my opinion. So I at least had to consider him, even though I also know that Ovechkin is not what he used to be right now in his career. Number 9 for me, that is where I have Brad Marchand. He is the perfect example of a player who you'd love if he was on your team, but you hate if he's not. They don't call him the little ball of hate for no reason. He can play in any situation, 5v5, power play, especially on the penalty kill. And I'll say this, I still think, despite being in his mid-30s, Brad Marchand is one of the 5 best penalty killers in the league. Like, the way that he's able to just put the fear of God into your unit every time he steps out on the penalty kill, that shows something. Just because like when you're moving the puck around the point, you always have to figure out where 63 is on the ice, because he's had plenty of shorthanded breakaways throughout his career, plenty, especially against the Penguins, because it feels like every time he's out there against the Penguins power play, he has a shorthanded chance or a shorthanded goal. He's scored plenty of them in his career against the Penguins. So again, top 5 penalty killer in the league, in my opinion. Yeah, his production has dipped a little bit, but his all-around game is still very much there. This is still a great player in today's NHL. Brad Marchand, number 9 for me.
When we get to Pasternak later, we'll shout out the perfection line, because the kids aren't going to know how good that was back in the day, man. There was a reason NBC said it every 3 lines of dialogue on their broadcast back in the day. Number 9 for me, I have Sam Reinhart. I was going back and forth, but I think the potential for Reinhart to move up this list as opposed to somebody like Marchand, who feels relatively stable where he's at. We do have to mention, he shot 24% this last season. Part of the reason why he exploded for 57 goals, 9% higher than his career average. I think Reinhart on a good team can consistently be a 40-goal guy. He's still young enough where he can compile some good stats. He's got a pretty solid defensive game as well. He's gotten some Selke buzz a few separate times. He finished 4th this past season. I believe he was 8th a couple seasons ago. And I think Reinhart, as opposed to just talking about his game, I think it's the textbook example of what you want your general manager to do, is recognizing a player with a good skill set, not in a great environment, and saying, I think we can do something with this. That's the type of swing you want your general manager to take, is somebody in a bad situation.
Yeah, I mean, and the Panthers really didn't have to give up too much to get him, Nick, if you remember that trade. The Panthers kind of fleeced the Sabres at the time when they got Reinhart from them. So they did a really nice job with that. And then he got very handsomely compensated after the year that he just had for the Panthers. Number 8 for me, that's Mitch Marner. Yeah, his goal scoring went down a little bit this year with only 26, but he is still a point per game player due to being a very strong playmaker. That's been his bread and butter. I feel like over the years, he's very good with the puck on his stick in terms of his playmaking ability. His defense, I think, has also gotten better over the years as well in his own zone, at least in my opinion. I still think he needs to be a little bit better in the playoffs at times for Toronto. There's definitely been some years where he's been one of their better players. He's been at a point per game. This past year, though, only 1 goal, 3 points in 7 games. If you want to win playoff series, you need your best players to be better than that. Marner wasn't good enough in the playoffs. I know we can make the joke about the Maple Leafs in the playoffs all we want, but still, he needs to be better in that type of series against a team like the Bruins if the Leafs want to advance. But this is still a very good player in his own right. I understand people call him overrated. I don't really subscribe to that notion. I still think this is a very good winger in today's NHL. Definitely top 10. Mitch Marner, number 8 on my list. When he's on, he is a treat to watch.
I have Marner number 8 as well. One of the best two-way wingers in the league. I would say he's second to a guy we're going to talk about a little bit later as far as offense and defense. I don't think people realize how good Mitch Marner is. He's got where is it here in my notes? He's got the 7th most points of any player in the entire league over the last 5 years. He's consistently over a point per game with elite defense. He can play with anybody. He's a great facilitator. He's able to manufacture offense. He does have 50 career points in 57 career playoff games. We're not talking about somebody who goes, half a point per game, a third a point per game in the postseason. Yes, the Leafs have been in a lot of close games and they've lost a lot of coin flips. You want your star players to be the difference in those games, and that's a fair criticism.
Yeah, that's my main thing. Like, he hasn't been bad in the playoffs. No. I just think he needs to be better at times in those big high stake games, especially.
You would like him to have a moment. Right. You would like him to have one of those signature moments at some point in one of those games that they've had. But I'll end my Marner spiel on this note. You are not getting anybody close to value if you trade Mitch Marner. It's why it's a bad idea. It's why, even though you're going to give him a contract you're not going to feel great about, it's better to have Mitch Marner than the 3 pieces you would get in return for Mitch Marner. I throw it back to you for number 7.
Yeah, so number 7 on my list is Jason Robertson. I don't think he gets enough credit for how good he's been in Dallas throughout his career, coming off a point per game season once again after putting up 109 points last season in 22-23. I think he's the ingredient that makes Dallas's forward group so potent. I know you can put Rupe Hintz there. You can maybe talk about some of the older players like Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin. You can throw Wyatt Johnston in there, considering how great he is. But again, he is the main ingredient, I think, at least in my opinion, Robertson, that makes Dallas's forward group so great. He has a great release, really good playmaker, also really good around the net. He is great at getting some of those garbage goals, really big body. He also brings that physical element to his game. He's not afraid to lay the body out there whenever. So Robertson, number 7 on my list. He is a ton of fun to watch. I could see him squeezing into the top 5 potentially for next season if he has another really strong year this year. But Robertson, I think at this point, still one of the more underrated players in the league. I don't think enough people realize just how good Robertson is.
When we come back, we will keep making our way through the middle of our list, and hint, yes, Jason Robertson is coming up on my list as well. It is almost the end of summer. I know if you're like me, you've been squeezing in as many concerts, as many baseball games, as many WNBA games as you possibly can. And if you want to get out to a show, to a game before the end of summer, the only place I get tickets is from our friends over at Gametime, with some of the best features in the ticket buying experience. Things like all-in pricing, where you toggle the feature on and it shows the total price upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. The seat view, where you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. If you're going to a concert, you want to get an idea of what the stage looks like. If you're going to a baseball game, you want to get a feel for what home plate's looking like. You're going to be able to tell what balls and strikes are looking like from where you're sitting. It's hard to do that from certain angles at a baseball game. The lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference, and Gametime ticket coverage, where your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy one of the other Locked On national shows, whether it be NFL, MLB, or NBA, or if you're like me and cramming for fantasy draft, Locked On Fantasy Football provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day. National experts and local insights on every team in the league, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Number 7 on my list, I have Jason Robertson as well. Robertson's well over a point per game so far in his NHL career. He's .314 and .292. He's a career 15% shooter, which is 5% above the league average for the era we're in right now. This is one of the best pure goal scorers in the entire league. He does it in a big, imposing frame, 6'2", 6'3", 210 or so. This is one of the premier power forwards in today's NHL, and he's got a wicked shot to boot. It's not like he's just parking himself in front of the net, even though he's good at that too. As you alluded to in your segment when you were talking about Robertson, he's great around the net because he's so big. He can get low. He can box people out using his frame. He's one of the premier power forwards in today's game, and he's only going to keep getting better. You know, we're only 3.5 seasons into this experience. The more reps he gets, the better feel he gets. I think Robertson, as you said, has a good chance to sneak up closer to 5 or 4 on this list the further we go into the future.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we still haven't fully seen his true peak years yet. Even though he's had a 109-point season, I still feel like he could get even higher despite, he doing what he's already done so far. I still feel like there's even more room for him to grow, I think is what I'm trying to say. But number 6 on my list, that's Artemi Panarin. 49-goal, 120-point season was one of the biggest reasons why the Rangers won the President's Trophy this year. I think for a little bit, people were wondering if he was still just a product of Patrick Kane after leaving Chicago. But that question was quickly answered after leaving Chicago, considering how good he was in Columbus and then how good he's been with the Rangers overall. I still also want to see him play a little bit better in the playoffs at times for the Rangers as well, just because it feels like at times he hasn't shown up in some of those big moments, kind of like Marner in a way, Nick. I feel like Panarin, he's had some big moments in the playoffs at times, but I think it's hasn't been as many as I expected him to when he signed that long-term contract in New York. He's great on the power play, especially with his playmaking ability, really good around that net front area, or just around the goal line, I should say. His release is really strong. He's just a very fun, crafty, shifty winger in today's NHL, and he's number 6 on my list.
Number 6 for me, I have Kirill Kaprizov. I think if the Wild ever get their act together, we'll get a better understanding of just how good he is, because he's arguably He's in the conversation for second best skater in the entire league behind McDavid. It's him, it's Barzal, it's Jack Hughes. When Kaprizov gets the puck on his stick with space, he is able to bob and weave. He's somebody I've been a proponent of, and the Wild have done this at various points where they run the power play through a winger where he will just skate the perimeter of the offensive zone and make defenders come to him, which is going to open up spots for other guys. That's how good of a skater he is. He's consistently been over a point per game since coming over from Russia. This is somebody who is undoubtedly the best player on his team. The one knock on him, we don't get to see the Wild a lot because they've struggled the last year or so to really kind of figure out what they were going to look like during this come down period from the Suter and Parise contract. So the hope is they're able to figure it out. Him, Eric Sinek, Zuccarello, Ryan Hartman, they've got a decent group. They can flirt with a playoff spot, but I think until the Wild get a second elite player to really support him, it's going to be hard for him to really break through into some of these conversations. But yeah, incredible player. One of the best pure skaters in the game today.
Agreed. Kirill Kaprizov is number 5 on my list. He's also a player that, again, you said it, Nick, he doesn't get discussed enough around the league. I think part of the reason is because he plays in Minnesota on a team that has not been that good, especially last season. I don't think the Wild are going to be that good again this year either. But despite playing on the Wild, he's one of the most electrifying players with the puck on his stick. You mentioned his speed. He is a joy to watch when he's going up and down the ice. 46 goals, 96-point season on, again, a very meh Wild team. You knew he was going to be special right when he came into the league. And again, I could also watch him skate for days. But after that first season, I was like, okay, I feel like this is just a taste of what's to come for him. And then we saw that over the next few seasons because he's been one of the best players in the league. But really fun playmaker with the puck on his stick. He can make anything happen when he's on the ice. A true superstar in this league, at least in my opinion. I also love how he's so deceiving with the puck on his stick. It looks like he's going to make a play, then does something else. He is a treat to watch. Kaprizov, number 5 on my list.
After Kaprizov on my list, I have Panarin. The thing I will say in defense of Panarin, especially about this last postseason, is he was on the Rangers' best line at 5-on-5, and Trocheck and Lafreniere both had great postseasons and regular seasons. And I think it's a testament to just how much other teams respect Panarin's ability to both score and create, set a career high in goals this past season. In any other year, he would have been a Hart Trophy finalist, but he just so happened to do this in a year where Matthews had 70 goals and McDavid and Kucherov both had 100 assists, stuff that just frankly doesn't happen all that often. Panarin has had some truly great seasons as a Ranger. He's been consistently amongst the leaders in points over the last handful of seasons. He's got the 4th most of any player in the league since joining the Rangers in 2019. The only players ahead of him are McKinnon, Draisaitl, and McDavid. He has consistently been amongst the best in the world since joining the Rangers. And to your point about the playoffs, his game doesn't translate as well to the postseason because it is speed, it's transition, and he's not as inclined to slow the game down and create and play make. I throw it back over to you. Let's try and squeeze in one more before the break.
Yeah, number 4 for me, Mikko Rantanen. I almost had him number 2 or number 3 on this list, and I think I can make a really strong case for having him be number 2 or number 3. He is also, I feel like, one of the more underrated players in this league. I feel like even though he plays on Colorado, which, again, I understand he's a part of that 5-man unit where you put out there, Landeskog, Rantanen, McKinnon, Taves, and Makar, especially when Landeskog is healthy, and hopefully he will be this year. And I know he's part of that unit. When they're all out there, you cannot get the puck off any of their sticks. Just good luck to whoever's out there against those 5 players. But Rantanen, he is that guy. He can finish off all of McKinnon's chances that he sets up, but he's also one hell of a playmaker in his own right. He had 55 goals in 22-23, followed by 42 goals this past season. He also had 104 plus points in back-to-back seasons. He does it all when he's on the ice. I think his defensive metrics have also not been too terrible over the last couple of seasons. He's a pure sniper, but again, also a really good playmaker. I love watching him when he's on the ice, and his skating is also really improved, I feel like, these last couple of years as well. He is a treat to watch on the ice. Rantanen, number 4 for me.
I'm going to squeeze in Matthew Tkachuk right here. Tkachuk, transformational player. He's got the 10th most points of any player in the league over the last 5 seasons. Since getting to Florida, has really solidified himself as, oh, wait, this was the best guy on that line for the Flames 3 years ago that had all 3 guys over 100 points with him, Lindholm, and Gaudreau. Not a knock on Gaudreau. Tkachuk is just that good. This is probably the best power forward in today's NHL. He is consistently in and around the net front. He is consistently mixing things up after whistles. He's amongst the best players in the entire world. And every time I think about Matthew Tkachuk, I think about an international incident at the Olympics 2 years from now when Matthew Tkachuk is going to be in someone's face after a whistle and everybody in Canada or whatever country America's playing is going to be all up in arms about, why is Matthew Tkachuk acting like this? This is the Olympics, as if we haven't seen him chewing on his mouth guard like a feral dog for the last 5 years. Tkachuk is one of the best in the world. I cannot wait to see how the Panthers follow up their season coming off of a Stanley Cup. Hunter and I will be right back to wrap up today's show. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. I throw it back to you, sir.
Number 3 for me, I was going back and forth between this kid and Matthew Tkachuk. And I landed on David Pastrnak for number 3. I feel like there's also been so many lists I've seen for top 10 wingers where Pastrnak is outside the top 5. And I'm just like, I don't understand what you people are talking about. He's had 2 straight 110 plus point seasons, one of the best pure snipers in the league. I mean, that release, man, is disgusting. It's so deceptive as well. It's great at 5-on-5. It's especially great on the power play. His one-timer is a thing of beauty. I mean, he had a 61-goal campaign, for God's sakes, during the 22-23 season. He's really come into his own these last several seasons. We all know how great that perfection line was with him, Brad Marchand, and Patrice Bergeron for several years in Boston. And as I said about that 5-man unit in Colorado, Nick, when that top line was out there, good luck getting the puck off of their sticks, man. With how great Bergeron is offensively, offensively and defensively, how great Pastrnak is, especially in the offensive zone. Marchand is both offensively and defensively. Then they can also put out McAvoy if they wanted to, whoever else they wanted to put with McAvoy. Good luck getting the puck off their sticks when that perfection line was out there. Pastrnak, he does not get the credit that I think he deserves from some people in the NHL. Number 3 on my list, one of the 5 best pure snipers in the NHL, probably top 3 right now, maybe even right behind Austin Matthews if we're being real with ourselves. But man, I could watch that release for days. He's number 3 on my list.
I have Rantanen here in the spot. I think Rantanen's blend of size and speed is just really rare in today's game. You alluded to how strong of a skater he is. At his size, with his release, this is arguably the best two-way winger in the entire sport. Somebody who, frankly, as you said, is probably never going to get as much recognition as he deserves because he plays on a team with McKinnon and Makar, 2 of the defining players of his era. But don't get it twisted. Rantanen is very much in the conversation of best players in the world in today's game, consistently above a point per game, consistently elite defensively, and somebody that's really the way you know him and McKinnon are as good as everyone says they are is the fact that the Avalanche have basically hollowed out their entire team except for like 4 guys, and they're still pretty competitive with just him, Rantanen, McKinnon, and Makar. If that's all you need to be competitive, those guys are pretty good.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with you. But number 2 on my list, that's Matthew Tkachuk. Best power forward in the NHL today. 26-goal, 88-point season this past year after having 2 100-point seasons in a row. At the time, I felt like the Flames got what they could for Tkachuk. I was kind of like, oh, the Flames, they actually didn't do that bad here. But then as we've seen the last couple of seasons gone, it just hasn't gone according to plan, especially with how Huberdeau has played there, et cetera, et cetera. But Tkachuk was everything the Panthers needed and more. He's great offensively. He's good in his own zone. He stirs the pot like no one else does in the NHL. It reminds me a little bit of Marchand, honestly. He's someone who you love him if he's on your team, but you hate him if he doesn't. For me, I've never really hated someone like Matthew Tkachuk. I love watching him play. I can't wait to see him play at the Four Nations Face-Off in the Olympics in 2026 because I feel like he's going to piss off everyone in those competitions, whether it's Team Canada, Finland, Sweden, whoever. else they play in the Olympics, but especially for the Four Nations face-off, he's going to piss off all those top countries. Has a great shot, really good playmaker. He can score from anywhere on the ice. Again, a total pain in the butt to play against. He's great around the front of the net, and we all know it. He brings that physical element that the Panthers love to do against other teams. Him, Sam Bennett, especially in this last year's playoffs, that he loved laying the boom as well. The Panthers are the definition of a very ratty team. For people that maybe play video games, you play against players who are very annoying to play against, and they maybe, camp corners and stuff like that. They're rats. That is what Matthew Tkachuk is. He is a total rat in the nicest way possible, and it's a ton of fun to watch, at least for me. I know a lot of people hate it, but he is a rat on a team full of rats. He's number 2 on my list.
Tkachuk's a treat. I mean, not to glorify it, but he did try and play in the Cup final with a broken sternum. Yeah. You can't say the guy doesn't want it. You can't say he isn't about that action. Matthew Tkachuk is very much about that action, no matter who it is, what time. I think about him throwing I think about Chris Kreider. To get Chris Kreider mad enough for Chris Kreider to throw his mouth guard. Like, Chris Kreider is the most melancholy, blank, affectless person during a hockey game who only gets excited when he scores. Otherwise, he's very much indifferent. To get him mad enough to throw his mouth guard, just a testament to how annoying it must be to play Matthew Tkachuk. Number 2 for me, I have Pasta. As you said, this is probably the most dynamic winger in the sport. Somebody who can consistently score 40 to 50 goals, who can facilitate. We think about 2 years ago when the Bruins won the President's Trophy. It was him, Taylor Hall, and Pavel Zacha. And they said, Pasta, you got this, right? And he was like, yeah, I got this. And he was still over a point per game playing away from Marchand and Bergeron. And when you have, not Taylor Hall, Krejci, because they brought Krejci back 2 years ago. A lot of names floating around in my head, but yeah, Krejci, him, credible player, hilarious player, somebody who really gets it. He's one of the few NHL players who shows a semblance of personality and doesn't come off as annoying or toxic or weird. He just genuinely comes off as like, oh, this guy's cool and he's nasty at hockey. Somebody who is a treat to watch, who is frustrating to watch. You can't ever get the puck away from him. The release is incredible. I would say it's probably the second best release in the game after Matthews, and it is almost impossible to make the play on him. And in today's game, when you see a guy that is this good at just shooting the puck, it's a testament, because everyone's good now. 10 years ago, the average NHL player was not this good. So for Pasta to look this much better than everybody else in the context of the game today, it's just a testament to how good his shot is.
And he's not close to being done either. No. He's still a player that's going to score 40 to 50 plus goals for the next several seasons, considering how good he already is in the NHL. Number 1 for me, I know it's number 1 on your list as well, Nick. Nikita Kucherov, to me, he is a top 5 player in the world, has been for some time. The plays he can make as a playmaker are so crisp, and my God, he is so deadly by the goal line. Whenever the Lightning are on the power play and he gets the puck right near the goal line, you know where I'm talking about, where his spot is. It's like the fear of God is put into basically every team, because he can thread the needle so beautifully overall. And I'm just like, it's beautiful to watch overall. And I mean, production-wise, 100 assist season, 144 points overall this past year, 2 straight 100-point campaigns. As I said, great on the power play, really good at 5-on-5 as well. He is also kind of that main ingredient that makes Tampa Bay's forward group, I guess, kind of go a bit as well. For a while, I felt like it was Stamkos, and then Kucherov comes along, and then he took that main mantle away from Stamkos. And he's going to keep that mantle for quite a long time as well. I could watch Kucherov for days as well. I know I've said that for basically every player on this list at this point. But man, especially on the power play, Kucherov is so lethal down there. And I'm curious to see how he follows up this next season.
Kucherov's one of the era's defining players, of the post 2012-13 lockout. This is one of the 5 best players of this era. This is one of the defining players. He's got a heart. He's got a couple 50 goal. He's got 150 goal. He's got a couple 100-something points. This is one of the best players we're ever going to see play this sport. I have no hesitation in saying that. This is a first ballot It should be unanimous Hall of Famer. This is one of the best players on one of the best teams of all time. You know, that window of the Lightning from 19 through 22 is one of the best 4-year runs we are ever going to see. And this was probably the best or second best player on all four of those teams. And it's just, it's hard to fathom being this good at something. As you alluded to, Kucherov, when he gets the puck at the half wall and he can skate it down and walk it down, and he'll bring the defenders towards him. So he's either got Stamkos for the one-timer on the cross seam, or if the defenders don't get pulled to him, he goes short side and beats the goalie clean high. This is what it looks like. You know, to quote the great John Rivers, this Kucherov is what it looks like. You give him the puck, he's going to make it happen. You can say what you want about the defense, about not taking the All-Star game seriously. I don't care. This is the best winger in the sport. I think when all said and done, he's going to be right there. When we talk about this era 10, 15, 20 years from now, it'll be McDavid, it'll be Matthews, it'll be McKinnon, and then I think Kucherov is the fourth person on that list. You could maybe make an argument for Draisaitl or Cale Makar or whomsoever. I think it's Kucherov. I think he's the best non-center of those guys. I think he's the best non-center in the world. I think he's probably the third or fourth best player in the entire world. I have no hesitation in saying that, and I'm very curious to see how Tampa Bay does in this next iteration. If they keep him and Point locked together, if they put Point with Gensel and try and get more out of them and tell Kucherov, hey, you kind of got to drive your own line and we'll figure it out. Because if he's as good as we all think he is and have seen he is, he'll figure it out with Tony Cirelli. He'll figure it out with Brandon Hagel.
I'm curious to see if they just load up their super line and kind of do something with like Point, Gensel, and Kucherov while doing something else with their other lines. But I also feel like that might be a little too top heavy, right? Just because you have that super line, but then you have the rest, you know, Cirelli, Hagel, etc. It's just not as daunting as that top line. But I'm so curious to see if John Cooper really loads them up. He does especially have that option, but I could see them doing what you suggest, Nick, and maybe putting Kucherov on his own line, seeing how he drives offense. But he's also one of the most clutch players of this era as well, especially in the playoffs. I mean, he's been dynamite for the Lightning so many times in the playoffs over the years. Whenever they've needed a big play, whether, you know, it's an assist or a goal, he's always been there to make it. But yeah, he'll go down as one of the best to ever do it. And it's going to be a lot of fun continue watching him throughout his career.
Okay, I wanted to fact check. 44 is his career high, not 50. Two-time Cup winner, two-time Art Ross. He has one MVP. Arguably, in another year, probably could have won this year as well for the season he had on the team he did. But that'll do it for this week's edition of Locked On NHL. We tack up the wingers. Next week, stick around for us to glaze Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, Austin Matthews, and the best centers in the world. Because as Hunter said, this is why hockey's fun. It's guys like this. We really could watch a 40-minute compilation of Kucherov goals or Nathan McKinnon skating because they make it look that easy. Before we get out of here, I want to thank everybody for making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Now go check out one of the other national Locked On shows where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local flavor. You can find the link to any of the Locked On NHL shows in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hunter and I will see you guys next week.